Animation Network podcast as we work through book 2 of the series, Confronting the Past. After a real downer of a chapter last week, we are back with the fallout from the other perspective with chapter 18. So let's get to it. Chapter 18. Colin was preparing to leave when the front door burst open. All 3 occupants jumped, hands going to their respective weapons. Sorin hadn't let his sword get out of arm's reach since the night before. "Matt's been found," Paul panted out, eyes wide and expression frantic. "What?" Sorin asked, springing to his feet. "Just after Shannon came this morning, we were doing a sweep of the boundaries and found his body." "He's dead," Colin said quietly. The teen nodded, swallowing. "Stomach wound. It was probably quick," he said with a brief shrug. Dean shifted closer to his father. "Shannon would like all of you to come. There was a note from Russ and Morgan, and she wants to make sure it's Morgan's handwriting because it's not Russ's." "I thought you saw him last night," Dean said in a small voice, looking between the 3. "We did," Sorin said grimly. "Of course we'll come, Paul. Colin, you know her handwriting, don't you?" "Absolutely." "Come on. Shannon still wants you to be able to make your meeting." "I can go without her," Colin said, but Paul shook his head. "No, she has to go too. We all know that. That's why she couldn't go with Russ in the first place. Come on," he said more insistently, and the 5 followed him out the door. Shannon met them at the door to her headquarters, expression caught between despair and desperation. "You promise me that Russ will be all right," she demanded of Sorin the moment they appeared. "I promise," he said, meeting her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Shannon," he added less confidently. "I swear he was fine when we saw him. He was actually the least injured of the 3. She shook her head and managed a smile around red-rimmed eyes. Morgan, if it is Morgan's handwriting, explained it. She held out the note to Colin, who took it. "It seems to have been because Chris felt like it at the moment. Felt they were getting too complacent or something." She shrugged. "It was Christopher Malone being Christopher Malone." Colin nodded. "It's Morgan's handwriting, all right. I'm sorry too, Shannon. Russ had explained, and it's never easy to lose a friend. I don't know what I'd do if I lost Ben, Russ, or Sorin at this point." "Thank you," she said, nodding briefly. "Sorin, is there any chance we can move things up to tonight? I don't want to give him the chance to be fickle again." "If Cal, Rain, and Johnson will agree to it, yes." "Won't it be too soon?" Paul asked, biting his lip and wincing at the look Shannon shot him. "I know. I'm sorry, Shannon, but you don't want Malone to be suspicious, do you? Wasn't the whole point of waiting in the first place?" The teen's eyes were also red, and he wiped at them with the back of his sleeve as he talked. "Actually, with Matt and Zeke's death, it might seem like less of a contrived attack than it might be if we'd waited. He's pushing us, and he knows it. Malone has to expect us to react, and if we react the way he wants, that might give us the chance to rescue Morgan and Russ from under his nose while he's snickering in glee over us making the predictable move," Sorin said, thinking out loud. "So you think he'd be expecting an all-out frontal assault?" Paul asked, frowning as he absorbed it. "He might be expecting that in some sort of sneaky attempt to attack, but he won't be able to resist taking the bait anyway," the teen finished, eyes wide. "Of course not. Malone's always been impulsive." His cheeks reddened at the looks from his companions. Shannon eyed him with distinct approval. "Oh, sorry, Mr. Dacamar," he apologized. A flicker of amusement danced its way across Sorin's face. "That's quite all right, Paul. I never stop a good mind. And yes, you're very right." "I told you I liked Paul," Dean piped up, grinning. Colin glanced over at Shannon. "You'd probably kill me if I offered Paul a job with Kin, wouldn't you?" She smiled slightly. "No, it would be Paul's decision, and if that's what he wants, that's what he's wanted. He's clever, that's for sure. If you are, tell me now so I can start training Tim or Margs better to take control someday." Colin snorted. "We'll talk about it later," he said. Sorin, noting the shocked but hopeful look on Paul's face, figured the boy would be headed towards Oakbridge soon enough. "How long until the next meeting?" "We should probably get going. Paul, tell Don and Robert that I want a double guard on Russ's house until further notice." Colin frowned slightly. "We can take care of ourselves." "Russ would be devastated if Dean got hurt, and so would I. It's not fair to make children suffer, even by accident, and around Malone I trust nothing. I'll take no chances with someone who obviously means a lot to Russ either," she added a bit more gently, a smile crinkling the corners of her mouth for a moment. "I can spare the men. Now come on, Colin. We don't want to be late." Colin took a deep breath and threw Dean and Sorin a loose salute before following her out of the courtyard. "Dad, where am I going to be while you fight Malone?" Dean asked. "I don't know yet. I suppose that's one of the things we'll have to sort out. Shannon's going to suggest at the meeting that all the kids and anyone else who won't actively be fighting come to the headquarters here. Ours is the largest, furthest from Malone, and the easiest to defend," Paul said, and scowled. "She's insisting that Tim, Margs, and I stay here and help defend. Says she doesn't want us to risk getting hurt, and that it's an honorable job staying." "It is an honorable job. Paul, don't be in a hurry to be fighting battles," Sorin said with a quick smile. "It's not nearly as much fun, or even as honorable, as it might seem from the outside." "Yeah, so she said. really think I'm kin material?" he asked, eyeing Sorin. "If Colin says you are, then you most likely are. I don't disagree. And," here he ruffled his son's hair, "Dean's perceptions of people don't tend to be far off." Paul brightened. "Well, I guess it won't be too bad helping defend here." "I'll help," Dean added. Sorin gave him a stern look. "Dean," he started. His son heaved a sigh. "Or not," he said glumly. Paul gave him a reassuring smile. "I'm sure we won't need to end up doing any defending anyway, Dean, so don't worry about it. I'd better go fetch Robert and Don. I'll knock when we're back to let you know we're there." The teen grinned briefly. "I'm assuming you want as few people to know about you being alive as possible, right?" "That would probably be a good idea. Yes," Sorin said. "All right, I'll let you know when we catch up," Paul said before trotting off in the opposite direction. "Dad," Dean asked as they headed back, "why are people like Christopher Malone? Why do some people like hurting people?" Sorin let out a short laugh. "Because it takes all kinds of people to make the world, Dean. There are good, boring, bad, smart people, and everything in between. It's not always ideal for people who want to just live their lives, but if we were all the same, the world would be a pretty dull place, wouldn't it?" "Yeah, but we can be different without being awful," Dean argued, not at all satisfied with the old case for why the world turned. "You and me, we're different, and Russ, and Colin, and Paul, Shannon, Annie, we're all different, but we're not bad people. We don't like hurting others, even though I know most people, like you and Colin and Russ, end up hurting someone and getting hurt. People like this Chris Malone, he's just awful. I can't see a good thing about him, and not even with everything Russ told us since we came here. He's bad. He does nasty things to be nasty and likes it. So why are some people awful?" A breath escaped Sorin as he shook his head. "I don't know, Dean. I wish I did. It's a question I've been asking myself for a long, long time," he said quietly. Dean glanced up at him. "Because of your childhood?" Sorin nodded and tightened his grip around Dean's shoulders. He didn't want to have this conversation now, or ever, but maybe some of it needed to be said. "Yes, my father was also one of those people who liked to cause pain for the fun of it. There didn't need to be a reason," he said slowly. Dean's face scrunched up as he absorbed this previously glossed over facet of his father's past. "That's no kind of dad," he said finally, indignantly. "No, it's not," Sorin agreed as they reached the door and stepped inside. "Annie, too? And Vlad?" Dean asked, frowning up at him. "Yes? Forever and ever? I left when I was 18, but it was about then that Annie and Vlad were both big enough to stand up to him as well. He died. His heart failed him not too awfully long after I left." "Why did you leave? You left Annie?" he added, frown deepening. "I was old enough to go find my own way. And you knew I left Annie, kiddo, or else she would have known about you." "Oh, yeah," he agreed, brow deeply furrowed. "Dad?" Sorin fought the memories, as he always did when it came up. It was easier now, with time, with space, with Dean, but it didn't make it fun. "I love you, Dad. You're the best dad ever," he said, and hugged Sorin tightly. It was enough to jerk Sorin out of his thought spiral. I'm certain I don't qualify as the best ever, Dean, but I promise I'll always do my best and not be anything like my father." "You aren't," he said firmly. Sorin wrapped his arms around him and kissed the top of his head before pushing him away. He opened the front door to the house. "Come on, enough of this. Go grab your book from upstairs, and I'll read to you until Colin comes back, okay?" Instantly, the boy brightened, even though he gave Sorin a suspicious look. "Okay," he said, and bounded up the stairs. Sorin watched him go and rubbed his face. This wasn't the way he'd envisioned giving his son the first real hints about his childhood, but then he'd very purposely never envisioned having to explain it at all. Sorin was determined to give Dean the best childhood possible, which meant, in a lot of ways, ignoring everything he was brought up on and everything that had happened to him through those long years. Dean clattered back downstairs, clutching his favorite book. Sorin smiled as they settled onto the couch. Dean curled up next to him, perhaps a bit closer than usual as he listened. Sorin shook his head in amusement as the way his son still adored hearing things read to him, even though he was a fine reader on his own. It was another couple hours before Colin reappeared, pushing open the door, his gaze immediately searching out Sorin's. "They've agreed," he said without further preamble. "They're all in, and they're ready to go tonight. We agreed to meet on Shannon's side of the central square. Cal's pissed about Zeke, and even Rain, upon hearing about Matt and Zeke, jumped in wholeheartedly." He shook the rain out of his hair and grinned wryly. "It's a God's awful day out there now, but it seems to fit the general mood of the city." "When are we meeting?" Sorin asked. "Around dusk. Shannon stayed to figure out who exactly they're sending to sneak around with us. Cal, Rain, and Johnson agreed to lead the main fight, so Shannon could come with us. Problem is, only Rain's second is still alive, so they're not sure who else to send. Shannon said they'd figure it out." Sorin nodded. "I'm coming," he said, staring Colin down. Colin snorted. "As if I expected anything else, Sorin. Seriously. I'm not an idiot. In fact," he tossed the older man one of the things he'd been holding in his hand, "Shannon sends you a cloak with her regards, complete with hood." He chuckled as he caught it. "How thoughtful of her." He glanced back at Colin. And with the rain, how exactly are we supposed to know when to leave? Robert and Don said they would let us know when it was time to go, he said, jerking a thumb towards the door behind them. You'll get Morgan and Russ back, right, Dad? Dean asked. Sorin nodded. Of course, he said firmly. Let's finish this chapter, then we'll get ready to rescue them. The afternoon seemed to crawl by as Sorin and Colin pored over the maps they put together to get a general idea of where Malone's scouts were usually located and picked out the routes they should take. It was a mostly needless endeavor. Unless they were completely unsuccessful, Shannon and the others, who knew the city far better, would be there. Are we sure about this? Colin finally asked Sorin quietly, glancing towards Dean, who'd been lulled to sleep by the rain falling steadily against the house. No, Sorin said with a short, slight laugh. Wish I had more time to prepare. I'm not used to having so little time to understand a place and a person. I can't shake the feeling that despite knowing Malone will fall for the trap, he's going to surprise us back. Unhinged or not, he's quick, and that makes him much more dangerous. Colin nodded, brow furrowed as he traced a finger along their planned route. He was toying with Zeke last night. Zeke had skills, but we didn't see half of Malone's in what we witnessed. Russ told me Malone could never hold up to him. I believe it's not necessarily because Malone's less skilled, although it's possible. I've never seen them fight, obviously, but I suspect it's because Russ can goad him into leaving that column he seems to enter whenever he has a weapon in his hand and an opponent in front of him. Colin pursed his lips and thought, That's interesting, but would make sense from what we've learned. Zeke wasn't doing anything besides fighting, but I could see where taunting would quickly get under Malone's skin. They both fell silent, making a show of studying the map, even as their thoughts wandered down the path they would follow that night. Think we can pull it off? Not without loss of life. Anyone deserves better than living in constant fear that a madman's going to grab them and kill them one day, often for no reason, Colin replied fiercely. For a moment, Sorin didn't reply as he understood the ramifications of what Colin said. He obviously knew what had sent Colin down the path that eventually led to Ken here. He looked at the head of Ken, troubled. Is that what it was like when Vlad and I were in charge of Tira? It had to be. Colin blinked, clearly caught off guard by the question, which was slightly reassuring. But then they didn't really talk about the three. Not exactly, he answered slowly, seeming to gather his thoughts. Well, I suppose it was before I got bent out of Northwind. I lived in constant worry that you would attack before I was ready, but not afterwards. I knew we were safe in Vision, and later Greensward. As long as Ben stayed put, I could travel without any real worry of harassment because I was nobody and no one would recognize me. He grinned wryly. Of course, at that point, I had no idea my sister would become infamous, that anyone who might know enough and saw me would drag me off for questioning for my looks. You weren't madmen, though. Although, perhaps by the end, Vlad had begun to reach that point, he was certainly dogged in his search to find us. We knew we were asking for it by rebelling, and that you didn't go around picking random people off the street to murder. A few of your people might, but we knew those instructions weren't coming from the top. Sorin let out a breath. So not great, obviously, which he'd always known, but not graced by our levels of terror. He could work with that. Vlad always truly believed what he was doing was right. We didn't want people to live in fear of us. He laughed slightly. We wanted peace by creating war. It's amazing how logical something might seem at the time and yet have no real base in logic at all. My understanding is that you and Annie never truly believed. A slight smile touched Sorin's lips. I didn't care enough to believe or not, but does it really matter? I had lost Diana and was too afraid I'd go wrong trying to raise Dean on my own to try. I'd watched my father attempt to raise 3 kids on his own and seen how wrong that had gone. It was also something I had to do, as his brother. Do you regret it? Colin asked. Regret taking over Tira, deposing the king, threatening his son, and then attempting to protect it when his younger son led a counter-revolt? Colin couldn't help laughing. Well, when you put it that way. Sometimes, I regret the lives lost because of what we did, but a lot of the time I don't. The country has become stronger and better because of it. Sorin truly believed that, 4 years out, watching what had come out of the rise of the freedom fighters. Stronger and better, Colin repeated. Think about it. Would you all have met and ended up where you are if we hadn't taken over? Doubtful. Bo would either still be in hiding and awaiting an attack, or would have grown up a prince alongside his older brother. You'd be at Northwind, babysitting the northern border with Alia, bored out of your mind. Your sister Jez would have been married off to some minor noble and probably would have killed him by now. Colin had to laugh at that assessment. People such as the Harpers, Dolls, and Jessica would be living uninteresting lives, wasting their potential. Rylia? Well, I can see 2 possibilities. Either she wouldn't have survived, or else she'd have ended up in some backward town doing who knows what. Sorin shrugged briefly. I'm not saying what we did was right. I'll never say that. But a lot of right did come out of it. Colin ran a hand through his hair and nodded thoughtfully. You're right. I guess I'd never thought about it that way. He grinned crookedly. Life happened the way it did, and we've gone with what we were given. I'm not sure I would have wanted it to happen any other way either. I'm not sure if that makes me a bad person or not. Sorin snorted. We agree on all of that, then. Still not sure if I'm a bad person or not, on the whole. Suspect it's mostly a matter of personal interpretation, Colin said, before glancing past Sorin to the window. It's getting dark. I suspect it's nearly time. We should get going. Sorin nodded, moving to shake his son awake. Colin folded the map and shoved it into his rucksack. He then checked over his weaponry as Dean stretched and unfurled from the chair. It's time? The 10-year-old asked. Sorin nodded. Just about. Do you have your knife? Yes, it's in the kitchen from lunch. I'll go get it, he said, hopping up and racing out of the room. When Sorin didn't move, Colin looked over and smiled. He'll be fine, Sorin. He can certainly hold his own either way. You and Russ have done an amazing job. It's almost what I'm afraid of, Sorin said frowning. I taught him how to defend himself, but now, when it comes to a time when he might have to, I wish I'd never had to. Don't we all wish the world was a perfect, peaceful place? Colin said. Sorin snorted and nodded. Yeah, was all he said as Dean came rushing back in. All ready, the boy reported. Good. Promise me one more time that you'll stay at Shannon's headquarters and listen to the older people? Dean sighed. I promise one more time, Dad, he said, sounding exasperated. Sorin ruffled his hair fondly before pulling the cloak on and tugging the hood over his head. Well, he questioned. Wouldn't know you from the next man, Colin told him, which includes me, he said, doing the same. There was a knock on the door, followed by a voice calling out to them. It's time, sir. That's our cue, Colin said, glancing over to search out Sorin's eyes under the hood. We're coming, he called back. Dean took his father's hand and the three headed out. Robert nodded, led the way, while Don dropped into step behind Dean and Sorin. Sorin took a deep breath, touching the hilt of his sword. He hadn't seen action since the Battle of Oakbridge. He glanced at Colin briefly and wondered if the younger man was thinking the same thing. It certainly wouldn't surprise him if he was. He let the breath out slowly and focused his thoughts on the night's work. In theory, it would be simple. They'd start the battle, sneak out and around, storm Malone's headquarters, rescue Russ and Morgan. Presumably Malone would be killed in all the mayhem, and they could all go home again. A bit different, maybe, but still essentially the same people. In practice, Sorin suspected there was going to be some nasty bumps before everything smoothed out. Sorin was waiting with her contingent of men and women at the fountain. Paul shot Colin and Sorin a quick smile, wished them luck, then ushered Dean inside. They'll be all right? Sorin asked quietly. They'll be fine, Shannon said. Malone will have a lot on his plate tonight. Sorin glanced one more time towards the house before nodding and moving to stand beside Colin. Ready? She asked. Ready, Colin confirmed, with their two escorts having moved to join the rest of Shannon's group. She waved a hand and they moved out. Sorin was impressed at the easy formation they dropped into. They met up with Cal and Rain's much smaller groups, and for the first time it was clear to the two outsiders the damage Malone had done to the groups with the larger borders. Shannon and Russ had both told them that the guilds used to be equal, but it was obvious at a glance how badly poached both groups were, either through killings or swaying members to his side. As they fell into step behind Shannon's group, another group suddenly materialized out of the rain and fog. Sorin squinted against the driving rain, expecting it to be Johnson with the militia, but based on Shannon's tensing beside him, he didn't think it was. Shannon held up a hand, and almost instantly the entire group stopped, the only sound the constant splatter of the rain against the sodden ground. Greetings, she said cautiously, stepping out. Colin slipped into position beside her, while Rain and Cal appeared, moving to flank the two. Greetings, Shannon Culvert. The voice that spoke was male, although two stepped forward, one a man, the other a woman. We come to offer our services tonight. We heard tell of a battle against Malone. She nodded cautiously. That's true, and you would be? My name is Gareth Williamson, and this is my wife Trudy. We run... Yield in a moose, Colin said suddenly. Yes, I remember meeting you, he said, nodding. Sorin recognized the name as where they'd stabled the horses. Shannon's eyes widened. Yes, Mr. Williamson, I know you as well. And who else is with you? Gareth smiled. Regular citizens who have had enough, like you. We wish for a chance to help free our city from Malone's clutches. She held out her hand. Any and all help is appreciated, she said sincerely. Join in it back. We need to hurry. Lieutenant Johnson is waiting for us at the square. Gareth nodded, and Shannon waved the groups forward again, shooting Colin, Cal, and Rain a smile. Cal grinned briefly before heading back with Rain to their combined group. A few minutes later, they reached the square to find the militia already gathered. Sorin stared across the crowd and couldn't help feeling both impressed and amazed. Can you believe it? Colin asked Sorin as Shannon consulted with the other four leaders, now including Gareth. Believe what? Of course people are going to want to protect themselves, Colin. It's instinct. But still, how many of them could have hidden in their houses and told themselves that we would take care of it? Would you do that? No, but that's not my nature. Maybe it's not their nature either, Colin, Sorin smiled. I think you might be surprised at how many people out there are willing to fight for what they believe in. Could well be many more than you would think. But then, you shouldn't be, considering the freedom fighters. Good point, he agreed quietly. Shannon joined them, while Johnson, Cal, and Rain went to pick out the members of the group that would be making the move straight to Malone's headquarters. Reports from the lieutenant's men said Malone's men are massing on the other side of the square. Seems they noticed our movement like we wanted and are going to retaliate. Good. Means it shouldn't be too long before we can sneak away to go rescue Morgan and Russ, Sorin said. She smiled fiercely. Exactly. A group of about 25 men and women drifted in their direction. Is this the group? Colin asked, surveying them. This is them. Some of the best, Cal said as he stepped over to join them. Good luck. May the best one get Malone himself, he added darkly. Colin laughed shortly. I can agree to that. Thank you, Cal, for sticking with it. And again, I'm sorry about Zeke. I know, Colin. It's appreciated. He smiled wryly. I'm assuming we can expect more kin presence in the future? You bet. I'm not about to let one of Tira's cities get nearly this bad off again. Cal offered his hand. In case I don't see you on the other end, thanks for coming, despite the circumstances. You're a good man, Colin Lockholm. As you said, best of luck, Cal, he agreed, taking it firmly. It's time, Johnson called over, interrupting. Very well. Shannon and the rest of those who'd be sneaking away once the battle was joined moved to one side as the others stepped forward and spread out along the square and into the next roads. This is going to be messy, isn't it? Colin asked, brow furrowing. Yes, Sorin said simply. He cringed. I hate this. Sorin placed a hand on his shoulder as they watched Malone's forces materialize hazily out of the fog to line the other side of the square. Sorin tried to get a general count, but between the fog and the rain it was hard to get any sort of accurate number. Think we outnumber them? I would think so. Malone's feared more than he's liked. Colin shifted unhappily, and Sorin patted his shoulder gently. It'll work out. These things have a way of doing that, he said softly, not for the first time. I know. Doesn't mean I like it. I wouldn't think so, Sorin said, hand disappearing back underneath the cloak as the world seemed to freeze, both sides watching the other. What do you want? A man demanded, stepping out to the front. No, Malone. That's Kev, his second. Shannon muttered as she slid over to them. I noticed, Sorin said, a bit worried. We were expecting him to have an inkling. I suspect he's waiting for us. Colin didn't comment, eyes focused on Johnson, who'd stepped out to meet Kev. We want an end to your ability to cause terror throughout the city. By the will of the king, given to me as one of his officers, I order you all to stand down or risk death. Kev laughed. You hear that, friends? The king doesn't like us much. They were snickering from all along the other line. Colin bristled and found himself taking a defensive step forward at the same time as Sorin. Shannon threw out an arm, blocking them both. Don't, she said quietly. Colin clenched his fists, but stayed silent. Sorin stood at his side, tense. By orders of the king, disperse, Johnson repeated calmly. Or what? Kev chuckled. You gonna come here and beat us? The lieutenant smiled slowly. He doesn't have to. I believe the citizens of Greyspire will be able to do that quite nicely. Oh, and we're no longer citizens. You've had free reign long enough. You're in trouble and you all know it. Or else why would you be hiding in the shadows? Kev's eyes narrowed, no longer amused. We never hide in the shadows. Cal, from his position a few paces behind Johnson, let out a sudden laugh. That's all you do, he said scathingly. You hide in the shadows and pick people off because you're all fucking cowards. That'll do it, Shannon whispered. And almost before the words were out of her mouth, Kev had drawn his weapon. A roar resounded from Malone's people as they charged. Sorin watched the two sides clash and couldn't help a silent sigh as the first screams filtered out of the fray. Shannon's gaze was fixed on the 5 leaders, therefore and Kev, as they battled their opponents. She nodded. We can go. Let's move. Lead the way, Sorin said. Without another word, Shannon waved her hand and headed in the opposite direction, the others falling into step behind her. Sorin glanced briefly at Colin before following, trying to keep his breath even. Within a few minutes, they couldn't even hear the sounds of the battle. Noise muffled and separated.